The Warriors started the season 10-2 in their first 12 games, but since then has gone 2-3 in their last 5 games, and will probably be 2-4 at the time this video comes out. Here are my biggest takeaways during that period. During the Warriors 10-2 start, according to Cleaning the Glass, the Warriors were one of the best teams in the league. Their offensive stats as well as their defensive stats ranked within the top 10 of the league. As you can see here, their efficiency differential was great. They ranked 7th in points scored per 100 possessions. They shot a great effective field goal percentage as a team, and even the turnovers, which is something that they're notoriously bad at, were at the middle of the pack in the league. The defense was great as well. They were 4th in points allowed per 100 possessions, 2nd in opponent effective field goal percentage, 9th in turnovers forced. During the 2-3 stretch, the offensive numbers plummeted towards the bottom of the league, while the defensive numbers held up for the most part. However, I want you to pay attention to one area, and it's the offensive rebounding percentage and the turnovers forced. Early on in the season, the team was off to a hot scoring start due to some good shooting, but also some good transition basketball. Steve Kerr made it an emphasis to play less in the half court and get out in transition more this season. But you can't get out in transition unless you do two things. You get a stop, which either comes in the form of a live rebound or a turnover. Hence, the Warriors being top 10 in both areas allowed them to get out in transition with a frequency percentage of 17.1%, which ranks 7th despite not being able to convert them into points at the same rate. In the 2-3 stretch, the Warriors' transition frequency percentage dropped down to 15.7%, which ranks 12th with better scoring numbers. The difference in half-court frequency was apparent too. 10-2 stretch, half-court frequency 76.6%. 2-3 stretch, half-court frequency 77.6%. So to summarize it all, the Warriors do a good job of winning margins in order to generate easy scoring opportunities in transition and second chance opportunities to win basketball games. But the stats indicate that they've been getting out in transition less and less. So let's understand why we've been losing on the margins, playing in the half court more, and why the half court offense has been so bad. First things first, we're the best transition defense in the league. We rank number 1 in points allowed per 100 transition possessions and plays during the time of this recording. And a lot of that just has to do with effort and attention to detail of sprinting back on defense. Pretty much guys were doing a good job of staying out of limbo, and that type of consistency requires a lot of energy. So naturally speaking, it's not abnormal for guys to start being a little lazy and not crash the glass as much, because it is a hard thing to do on a night-to-night basis. Forcing turnovers has been more of an issue because of this as well, and also D'Anthony Melton being injured and out for the season does take a hit in creating deflections and steals since he was a big part of that. But the second thing that I think needs to be mentioned more is in addition to the last point, and it's the fact that the defensive coverages that the Warriors have been playing have been very taxing. Ever since Jerry Stackhouse took over the defensive coaching job, he's turned this team's defense around. Clearly, the team ranks high in defensive stats, but if you look at the way they're playing defense, they're doing a lot of icing and then eventually trapping. That type of coverage is not sustainable during an 82-game season. When you do this, you're inviting a 3-on-2 situation. You're pretty much accepting that your team's defense is going to be in rotation, which requires a lot of energy to ball pressure, track the ball, fly out to the perimeter to close out, tag the short roller, defend 2-on-1s correctly, and so on. In the beginning, it was working because teams didn't expect it, and you were fresh heading into the season. Now we're only 16 games in, and guys are looking gassed out there. There's gotta be more flexibility with the coverages because having this be the primary coverage is not it. Players are worn down to the point where getting out and running looks difficult. And then there's the half-court offensive issues, and this is very much simple. On this team, the best player is Steph. Outside of Wiggins, he's the only player on the team that can self-create and generate unassisted field goals. Everyone else on the team does not possess that talent. You look at the roster right now, and everyone is either a role player or they just play off the ball, and they need an on-ball scoring presence in order to play well. So that's why playing in transition was so vital, because these less talented players can contribute a bit more. But now that things are settling in the half court, defenses are locked in on your sets, they're switching everything. Steph is getting face guarded, Wiggins is the only one really scoring, and everyone else can't create shots or advantages. Particularly the bench, because if you look at the landscape, Buddy doesn't play on the ball, neither does Moody, Slow-Mo, or Loon. Kuminga and Pods are not good enough on the ball to elevate the team's half-court offense. Hence, that's why you now see Buddy Hield forcing a lot of shots, because outside of Steph, This team's offense has no backbone. Too many possessions where guys are either passing it around the perimeter or they're trying to make a move and end up picking their dribble and passing it back out. Or we even have possessions where we have slow-mo trying to create. That shouldn't happen. We need someone that wants the ball in their hands in crunch time. Despite putting up 20+ point performances, Andrew Wiggins is not that guy because in the last few games, he's nowhere to be found down the stretch. By the time I'm recording this, the Warriors lost to the OKC Thunder without Steph Curry, and down the stretch of the fourth quarter, they ran into the same problems again. No self-creation presence whatsoever. Second thing, listen, I don't know what's going on with pods. I made a whole video defending this man from Warrior fans last season, and boy is he making me look stupid. It's still early in the season, but I'm not going to lie, I'm this close to selling all of my stock on him and calling him Jack Harlow for the rest of the season. For me, it's not even the fact that he's not making shots, even though it is bad. Like, the dude is shooting way worse than Draymond this season. But what's pissing me off even more than anything is the fact that he looks like he's lost confidence in his game. There are moments where he has open scoring opportunities, whether it's off the pick and roll, catch and shoot, closeout attacking, getting into the lane, etc. And the dude just will not take a shot. Instead, he just picks up his dribble and kicks it back out. That's the worst of it all. It's one thing to miss shots, it's another thing to not take them. If teams know that you are only going to pass, they will have a much easier time guarding you if you don't believe in your game. Just look at Ben Simmons. I believe as a scorer, there are 3 pillars in order for you to be a great scorer. First and foremost, you gotta have a killer scoring mentality. Secondly, you have to have great self-creation ability, meaning generating unassisted field goals through isolation, pick and roll, and post-ups. Thirdly, you gotta have the ability to score off the ball. If you watch his highlights from last season, there is a big difference in all of the things that I just mentioned. His mentality to score was apparent, and his on-ball scoring was much more vibrant. He was beating people off the dribble, finishing through contact at the rim, and hitting pound dribble stepbacks. Name me a possession this season so far where Pods has replicated that same type of energy and capability. There seems to be a regression in his ability to score on the ball. It feels like he's injured, or he tore his Achilles or something, and he can no longer turn the corner to get downhill. Like, it's actually nasty that this man now uses post footwork to score as a guard. His bag is made up of step throughs, pivots, Pinoy steps, and slow steps. Bro hung out with Kyle Anderson for one summer and decided to hoop like him. I don't know what changed, honestly. And in terms of his mentality, I mean, that report that came out stating that the front office believes that he's a future all-star didn't do him any good. In fact, it most likely placed a lot of pressure on him. Sophomore slumps are a thing, so hopefully it's just that. But to add to it, he doesn't even make hustle plays that much anymore. Yeah, here and there he'll draw a charge, which is actually a great momentum booster in a game, but you rarely see him flying for those offensive rebounds the same way he did last season. And to me, that's raps, because if you're not contributing offensively, and you're not playing with that same high motor that you did last season, that really helped the team, and was the thing that ultimately earned you your minutes, then what is your value? Lastly, Steph Curry, the man that has built everything that Golden State has now. He's the system, he's our offense. Everything runs through him. He's one of the deadliest offensive engines the game has ever seen. But so far this season, Steph hasn't consistently played like one of the best players in the world. Yeah, he did have some good stretches of superstar level basketball, but as a whole, it's not really the same. And I believe these 3 things need to happen for Steph in order for him to remain at least a top 15 to 20 player in the league to help the Warriors contend. Firstly, please take care of the basketball. I don't know about you, but in year 17, I'm sick and tired of seeing Steph throw the same old passes and turning the ball over carelessly. So many times where he'll come off a high ball screen, he's driving into the lane, the defense plays drop coverage, and he'll throw a bad pocket pass. Or this is the worst one, he'll skip it to the weak side corner with one arm, and either it ends up in a turnover, or the pass is just so off target that the defense has time to rotate back into the play. I'ma need these type of turnovers to go, man. This is the one knock on Steph, and why people don't refer to him as a point guard. Simple answer is, do better. You're too great to still be making these type of mistakes at this stage in your career. Secondly, he's got to drive and finish at a high level this season. A trend that I noticed at the tail end of last season, which has been happening in this season as well, is that the finishing at the basket is not the same. Steph used to have some of the best finishing touch I've ever seen from a basketball player, something that is super underrated in his game. He had the ability to accelerate, decelerate his movement, and then throw up a floater, finger roll, hook shot, push shot, etc., and it would just calmly drop to the bottom of the net over the contest. Or it would softly bounce off the top of the backboard, and it would go in. This is going to sound crazy, but there were times where his finishing ability was a little more impressive than his shooting. But as of right now, during the time of this recording, according to shot creator data, Steph is 16 for 41 on drives to the rim. That's 39% finishing at the rim. By his standards, that's not great at all. Generally speaking, as an on-ball creator, Steph has regressed to a certain degree. The only thing keeping Steph in the game right now is obviously his off-ball scoring and his space creation ability. It's still one of the best in the game today when you have a situation where teams switch their bigs onto Steph. But that finishing ability has to be at a high level this season. Lastly, this is not even an issue with Steph. It has everything to do with Steve Kerr more than anything. I'm gonna need Steph to be on the ball more this year. I want Steph to play less of this motion-based offense, and instead, he should be on the ball more for two reasons. One, when teams either switch with great defensive personnel, i.e. the Clippers, or they top block every off-ball action, i.e. the Grizzlies, instead of making Steph run around 400 screens to get the ball, he needs to handle the ball and put pressure on the defense that way. There were so many times in the past where Steph on multiple occasions played like a role player, and it pissed me off. I used to blame Steph for it, but then I realized that it's been a Steve Kerr thing all this time. During the games against Boston, OKC, and Dallas, Steph was on the ball much more, and he was torching the opposing team's 5-man. He seems to be more comfortable being on the ball, and specifically playing at his own pace. That's where he can make good decisions with the ball. It's only when he's running around the court and catching the ball and then coming off of another handoff is where things get so chaotic that he starts making mistakes. Good things happen when Steph is aggressive. It's a great momentum boost, and he was fantastic on the ball down the stretch of the Dallas game. We need more of that in games to come. 2. This is something that I learned from seeing Klay Thompson play in Dallas this season, and it's the fact that Klay not being in Steve Kerr's motion offense has allowed him to play with much more effort in other areas of the game. He's hitting his open shots much better than he did last season, and I couldn't understand why until I realized that running around those screens at full speed the entire game is very taxing. Imagine running that fast to get a clean look, having to be physical to also fend off your defender, having to also make the shot, and being asked to do other things in the game as well. That's almost impossible unless you're prime LeBron. And I feel like the same applies to Steph. When he has to run around screens, he generally gives less effort on the defensive side of things. Steph is a very good off-ball defender in terms of making sharp rotations on the perimeter and disrupting passes with active hands. But he can't do that if he's expending so much energy on offense. So just like Steve Kerr is trying to preserve Steph's production by keeping him on a minutes restriction, he also has to preserve the level of intensity that Steph is playing on the offensive end. There's only so much high-level basketball that Steph can play left. You gotta play smart through an 82-game season and an additional 16-game postseason to have a legit shot at contending for a championship.